All right, thanks everybody for joining. My name is Scott Heist. We're here for another edition of the Free Training Thursday. Just by show of hands real quick, can you please just click your hand raising button to let me know that you can see my Abacus Law program okay? All right, thank you very much. Looks like we're good. And I can assume that you can obviously hear me okay since you followed those instructions. So today we're going to be talking about setting up the Outlook Sync feature inside of Abacus Law, which is a very handy feature. If you have any questions, you'll notice you are actually on mute. So if you have any questions, please just type them into the chat box, into the question box there, and my colleague Amanda will read those off at the end, and we'll get you all squared away. If we can't answer all of the questions in the time allotted, we will follow up with you by email afterwards. And also just remember we post these recordings, so you'll get a copy of that as well, so you can review it in the future. So again, we're going to be talking about the Abacus Law and Outlook Sync setup option, which basically allows you to either do a one-way sync or a two-way sync of contacts and calendar events. That's the big thing that most firms use it for. Primarily, I would say calendar events. That's the one that I see most firms, predominantly using it for. Using it for contact syncing is very popular if you're brand new to the program and you're trying to get contacts into your Abacus program. That's a good, good feature to have. But I would say on a day-to-day basis, the calendar syncing feature is really the thing that's the most popular. So we're going to start off here in our Abacus Law program on our main menu. And the place that we go to set this up is actually underneath of our file menu. You should be mindful of your security profile inside of the program. If you go into the file menu and you do not have the ability to access the synchronize feature, it's possible that you don't have the security permissions to do so. So you need to make sure you find out who your Abacus administrator is in your firm, and either have them adjust your settings, security settings for you, or have them set this up for you. But you'll notice underneath Synchronize, there's an option for Outlook Sync, and then there is a setup option. Okay, so again, you can either get to it by going to File, Synchronize, and then following those steps, or you can get to it by going to File, Setup, User Preferences, and you'll notice that there is a printing/email tab with an option for MS Outlook email setup. Okay, so either way takes you into the sync setup options. I prefer to get to it from the Synchronize menu. That's the way I train people to do it. So if you look at the way my screen is now, that is the path that I recommend administrators follow when setting up the Outlook Sync. And when you click that setup button, that is going to take you into the Outlook integration menu. Now, before we dive into what these little check boxes mean and these different tabs mean, you should do this on each individual's computer that wants to utilize this feature. Okay, remember, Outlook is a locally installed program. Every person has their own individual Outlook profile that's stored on their computer. So when you set this up, you need to go to each person's computer and make sure you are logging into the Abacus program as that person and then running through these setups. Okay, there is not an en masse way to do this. So you need to do it on an individual by individual basis. But you'll notice on the left side on the setup tab, Outlook Sync options. We have a checkbox for enable Outlook Sync. Well, if we want to do it, we obviously got to turn that on. Okay, and you'll notice when I check that box, I'm now presented with a few other options here, a few other features that I can either turn on or turn off. Sync at startup, sync at shutdown, or sync every, and then there's a time interval. So I would say that the sync every and then choosing a time interval is the most popular choice. If you want it to be real time, 5 minutes is about as close as we can get you here in this to real time, because we are at the mercy of the Outlook program at this point. Okay, so I can click 5 minutes, and that will ensure that my sync runs every 5 minutes. okay? So that should keep your calendar, really updated between Abacus and between Outlook. And then if you have Outlook on your phone, that's a great way to have it on your phone as well. That sync should be in real time. You can also just choose to sync at startup if you just want to do it once a day, or maybe sync at shutdown, or both. Okay, you can sync at startup and sync at shutdown, whichever you prefer. Like I said, the timed interval is the most popular that I see with our clients. You can also choose to sync whether Abacus is running or not. And what this does is when you enable this feature, it actually creates a Windows task. If you've ever messed around with Microsoft Task Scheduler, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it essentially creates a task that runs in the background that activates your Abacus sync program and make sure that everything's synced, whether you're had Abacus up and running or not. Now, I will tell you this. This actually only works right now for our users that have Abacus installed on their local network. So in other words, if you're using our Abacus private cloud, you can't use this feature just yet. Okay, we're working on that. It's something that will be updated in a future release very soon. But for now, just know that this sync whether Abacus is running or not feature, that only works for people with Abacus locally installed on the network. Okay. Now, once you click that little, enable Outlook sync option, you actually have some additional tabs here that we're going to focus on that you should also focus on. And that's the names and events tab. Okay, because this is where you kind of get to determine what qualifies to be synced and what doesn't. Okay, that's very important. We don't want, maybe we don't want, private events being synced, or maybe we don't want to-do list items being synced, stuff like that. A lot of firms, they just want appointments to be synced or active clients to be synced. So these are the tabs that you can go to really determine how Abacus qualifies something as being syncable. So if we start with names, and this is obviously only pertains to people wanting to sync contacts, obviously, notice the sync method. Okay, by default, it's set to synchronize changes both directions. That means anything in Abacus is going into Outlook, anything in Outlook is going into Abacus. Okay, so that means you need to be, if you choose this option, you need to be diligent about what is on your Outlook calendar. Okay, if you have a bunch of personal items or things that have nothing to do with matters, this may not be the best solution for you unless you're setting some sort of query to filter those out. Okay, now it could potentially be the most accurate way to do it. That way you ensure that both programs are up to date. But I always tell people you should really make Abacus your point of data entry, your primary point of data entry. And that includes the calendar and that includes contacts. Okay, so if you're setting appointments and you're entering new contacts in your system, then really in theory, using the second option that says only transfer from Abacus to Outlook should work for you. Okay, the reason I tell people to make Abacus your primary point of data entry is because of matter linkage. When you create an event inside of the Abacus calendar, one of the best things about that is you get to link that event to the matter that it pertains to, right? Well, Outlook was not made for law firms. So there's no way to do that if you create the event inside of Outlook, okay, or the contact inside of Outlook. There's no way to do that. When you sync it over, it's just going to get synced over as a random event, a random contact. You would then have to go into Abacus and manually link it. So if you're using Abacus as the primary point of data entry, you don't have to worry about that, okay? So I personally choose to transfer from Abacus to Outlook because I use Abacus as my primary point of data entry. But I get it. Some people still use Outlook for creating events and contacts. So if that's the case, just synchronize both ways. Now, by default, the include personal, private, and confidential contacts is not selected. Okay, so that's a good thing, right? We don't want that, usually, we don't want that being synced over into our Abacus program because it doesn't have anything to do with our work life, right? So we can choose to actually select that option, and that will include personal, private, and confidential contacts. Okay, so just keep that in mind too. The other option underneath that says transfer contacts with a blank last name. I never recommend turning this on. Okay, if you're entering business contacts into a database, you need to put their full name. So whenever I see a contact that just has a first name and no last name, that usually tells me that that's probably something personal, and I was just quickly trying to get it in. So, you know, I don't recommend turning that on unless you know that you have legitimate business contacts with no last name in Outlook. Then I guess that's fine. But, you know, my advice to you is to just be more diligent about putting your contacts in correctly. That way you don't have to worry about that. Okay. Now, I'm not going to go over, like I said, every single thing just for time's sake. But notice the names query here. It's set to active by default. So basically what that means is when a client, or I shouldn't say a client, a contact is listed as active inside of your Abacus database, it's going to sync. Okay, so that's the query. There are other queries that you can choose. When you click that little query arrow there, that pulls up your queries menu for your names. So you could choose any query that you've previously created that's in your database, or potentially create a brand new one. Okay, maybe you only want to sync contacts in a certain zip code. You could create a query for that. If you have any questions on how to create custom queries for syncing or reporting, please email us at training@abacusnext.com and let us know, and we can dive into that more for you. Now, if we kick over here to the Events tab, it's a very similar concept, same logic, okay? Still, we got to choose that sync method, right? Are we synchronizing changes both directions, or are we only synchronizing Abacus to Outlook? Okay, got to make that choice. So you need to decide what's best for you and then make that decision. But again, before you do your first sync, I highly advise making sure your data, both in Outlook and in Abacus, is cleaned up. You don't have blank records in there. You don't have blank last names. You know, you're not including private records and stuff like that. You know, do your due diligence there and make sure that that's all set up. Syncing alarms, that's very popular, and that's actually selected by default. Okay, you know how in Outlook, when you create that event and you get that little 15-minute bell that goes off before that client shows up, this is what that is. Okay, so if you set an alarm inside of Abacus for an event and that gets synced over to your Outlook, that alarm is going to get synced as well. Same thing if you have the alarm inside of Outlook and it gets synced to Abacus. So I definitely recommend leaving that turned on, so that way you make sure you know, you're getting notified ahead of time. Just like with the names, we have that checkbox that says include personal, private, confidential. Notice that is deselected because we usually do not want to include personal, private, and confidential things in our sync. That's just standard. Bill events that are marked with a dot at the front of the text. So anybody who has created events inside of Abacus has seen that little bill button at the bottom of the event window. And if you're using our accounting program, you're probably very familiar with that, especially if you're an hourly biller. So in other words, if you actually put a dot in front of the text in Outlook, when you create this event in Outlook, that will set up a billing window for that event, and it will actually bill it. Okay, and obviously you have to do some things there where you tell it the matter you want to bill it to, and things like that. But that's a feature that could be useful for people that are utilizing our accounting program and are actually doing hourly billing for different events. But again, if you're using Abacus as your primary point of data entry, then you don't really have to worry about this because you're probably already clicking that bill button in your event creation workflow. Sync things to do. For our Outlook users out there, to-dos in Abacus equal tasks in Outlook. Okay, so what this will do is make sure that your to-dos sync over to your Outlook program, and just note, you will find those to-dos listed as tasks. Down below that, this has to do with querying and setting up filters for what qualifies to be included in the sync. okay? So for instance, event queries. You've got a whole bunch of event queries that you can choose from, okay? Maybe you only want to do all open matters. Maybe you only want to do events that take place in the morning. Maybe you don't want to do any event that's already marked as done. That's a very popular one. If we've got it marked as done inside of Abacus, we probably don't have a need to sync that to our Outlook. Okay, so we could choose that as a query event, a query for events, I should say. But again, same rules apply for your queries. If you're not familiar with how to create reporting queries and filter queries, let us know so we can train you on how to do that. Okay, there's also good information in our reference guide on how to set that up. So that's kind of the basics of setting up the Outlook integration. And then of course, once you're done setting your standards and setting your your individual features, you can actually click Run Full Sync, and that will initialize that Outlook sync, and it will either replace items that are currently in your Outlook or Abacus and merge all of those items from Abacus into your Outlook. Okay, so just again, I can't stress enough, don't blindly click the Run Full Sync button. Okay, you really need to make sure before you enable this sync feature, please make sure that your Outlook data is cleaned up and you only have things in there that are accurate. Okay, because we don't want to end up with redundant data. We don't want to end up with name records that don't have that only have partial names and stuff like that. We want to keep our data as clean as possible. That just makes our life better when we're searching for names and we're searching for events. Okay, so I will turn it over to my colleague Amanda, and we'll read off some questions. So hopefully we have some good ones.
Thank you, Scott. I'm just going to give it a moment here and give people time to type in their questions.
Sure, no problem. And while we're doing that, I want to talk about one of the things that we offer here at Abacus that I think may be useful. When I'm training clients, a lot of times what they tell me is they really want to set up the sync because they like having access to their Abacus information on their phones, on their iPads, things like that. Don't forget that we have a mobile application. Okay, if you are not familiar with Abacus Mobile, please contact us so we can give you some literature on that. It is licensed, so we would need to add that to your license agreement. But with Abacus Mobile, you have the ability to directly access your Abacus calendar, your contacts, your matters, even do a little bit of document management and intake and stuff like that, like the intake process. So it may be something that's very useful for you rather than having to, do a sync all the time. Just keep that in the back of your mind. And if you're interested in learning more about that, please just contact us and we'll make sure we get that info to you.
As a reminder, the question panel is located on your right sidebar. We'll just give it another minute, but if there are no questions, we will conclude the webinar.
See, I'm so good, Amanda. They just get it on the first webinar. I love it.
I know. I'm very impressed. You're very thorough.
Yep. So, and while everybody's thinking or not, don't forget about our user conference. Okay, we have the user conference coming up in July 9th through July 11th. It's a 3-day conference where you get to meet and greet with Abacus employees. I'll be there. Our training staff will be there. Our great marketing people, of course, our executives and some of the higher ups. We've got some amazing keynote speakers coming to talk, and you get to learn about our products. So that's kind of cool. We'll be doing 3-day training sessions on all of our different products, and you can sit in and learn more about learn more about the system. And it's at Planet Hollywood in Vegas. I mean, I don't know if you need more of a reason than that to come. So please, we'd love to see you there.
Yeah, we're really excited about it, and we have some great things planned. So it does look like we have some questions coming through. The first one is, does this create a new Outlook, or does it use your Microsoft Online that you have been using?
Great question. So it does not create a new Outlook. What happens is even when you access Microsoft 365, that actually still, and I'm assuming that's what you mean by Microsoft Online, but that still actually on a computer somewhere has a profile set up. So when you set up the sync with Abacus Law, it actually integrates with that profile. Okay, so in other words, if I'm sitting at my computer and I turn on my sync, it actually integrates, with the Microsoft program that is installed on that machine. Whatever the default Outlook profile is, that's the one that it will sync to on that computer. So if you have, if that is a little too techy for some people, just let us know. We can work with your IT people, with your tech people in your office to get that set up for you and make sure that Abacus is syncing to the correct, user Outlook profile on your network.
So our next question is, anything need to be done on the mobile device?
I mean, aside from, well, no, I mean, not really. Aside from getting the license and installing it, we do some training on how to use it as well. We've got some literature on it. But yeah, I mean, there's no real crazy integration process that you have to go through. I mean, we can get it installed for you and all that good stuff. And then it's basically just access to your live Abacus program. So no, I wouldn't say there's really anything to do as far as setting up syncing options and stuff like that. It's pretty cut and dry.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to Scott. As a reminder, we hope to see you all at Abacus Maximus, and this webinar will be available on our website shortly. Thank you and have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone.